What's up, guys? So today, something I want to drop in about and explore a little bit with you is this idea of resiliency in relation to the elements. In olden times, our bodies had to interface with nature. We were exposed to the elements considerably more. And the adaptation that our bodies had to build in response to that constant stress of the environment made us fundamentally more resilient. We didn't have the chronic ailments that we had. Now, mind you, we typically died a lot younger and a lot sooner because there were a lot more stresses and we didn't have the comforts that we have now. But like most things in life, we have to find a balance with the old and the new. Currently, right now, people of the world were far too comfortable. And when we are far too comfortable, what starts to happen is that our natural immune response, the dialogue that we have and that we interface with in the natural world, starts to get weaker. The basic idea is that the more connection we have to nature, the more in touch we are with these natural rhythms, the stronger we get. Not only in the body, but also in the mind and the spirit of a person. When we look at what's happening in the world, people collectively are mentally a lot more sensitive. And sensitive isn't bad. To be fully sensitive is to be fully alive. We need to feel the nuances of life. But there also comes a point in human experience when something someone says or something we see that we disagree with, and people are destabilized and they have a meltdown and they start freaking out because of some disagreement or something they see in the world that they don't agree with. This is where it becomes a problem because it's fundamentally not good for our bodies or our minds. There's a certain amount of resiliency that we have to build in terms of natural experience. Now, resiliency comes through exercise, it comes from dialoguing with the elements, and it comes from fully surrendering to life processes, which means that if we have something very traumatic, we lose someone, we fully need to surrender to that process so that we can integrate what has happened. When trauma happens, it's not something we get over, it's just something we integrate. Carl Jung used to talk about it, integrating the shadow. We can't run from our shadow, we all have darkness, but when we have dark experiences, we have to surrender to them. We've got to feel them fully for them to integrate and for them to become medicine for us later, so that we are smarter, wiser, and more adaptive to stressors that come down the pike in life. Going back to the 5-element theory, Chinese medicine says this: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. These are 5 phases or rhythms that can create and destroy one another. They are essentially these large earth rhythms that we see around us that we were fully dependent upon for human survival. This theory is also paramount when we use feng shui, because it's learning how to identify elements through colors, shapes, and the actual element themselves, and learning how to interface with them consistently so that we are more adaptive, we are more resilient. So these 5 elements, critically important that we dialogue with them. Fire, earth, soil, metal, which is technology and tooling, water, and wood. Okay, the things we use for infrastructure and the basis of fire. The point I'm trying to make with you guys that I really want you to consider, and the thing that should stay on the front lines of your life, is that the more dialogue you have with the outdoors, the more your body is challenged by heat, by cold, by exercise. The more we have these acute stressors come in and challenge us, the more resilient the body gets. We need to be resilient. This is a difficult world. It's not easy. The Buddhists say life is suffering. And sometimes that's a choice and sometimes it just happens, I think, personally. The point is, we've got to engage these challenging scenarios. We've got to have our body interface with them. And this is why hyperthermic training, sauna, cold plunging, all right, fasting, which is a temporary stress that our body then is relieved of. Okay, exercise, hypertrophy, putting our muscles to use and creating new connections, new neural pathways, larger muscles, more integrated central nervous systems. We have to do this. And this is also part of the reason when people heavily exercise and they're very emotional, they go and exercise, they feel better because they've had to challenge their body physically and they have channeled what was a mental and emotional stress, and they've used their body physically and then it gets digested. They process the experience. And this is what we need to understand, is that we need to have different avenues or outlets where we can release our stress. If we are sedentary, sitting inside all day, reading comments on Facebook and social media and getting flustered by all the bullshit that we see in these platforms, and there's a lot of beautiful things too, but if we just get rattled and we just sit in there and we're not, getting close to fire, we're not jumping into cold water, we're not going out and walking in forests, if we're not decompressing and letting our bodies and minds unwind, then we get into a very sensitive, non-resilient organism. And that's where a lot of people are going now, because we don't have these challenges with the environment anymore. Of course, in modern times, there's a wave of people starting to hunt again. And people have always hunted, but it's becoming a little more mainstream. People like Joe Rogan, Cameron Hanes. You see these guys who are doing hunting and glorifying it, and they love it. And if you are a meat eater, that's one of the most, I think, the righteous and reasonable ways to do it, because you know what it's required to take an animal down, how much work it is. There's a certain amount of reverence for the life that it gives you. But a lot of people are triggered by this. They see it and think, oh, I can't do this. But outside of that, what these guys are doing is also challenging their bodies physically. They're going out into remote areas. They're going out into these difficult terrains, hunting it, developing a skill, something that human beings relied on for a very long time. So there are lots of different ways to challenge yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually. But the big takeaways, the ones that I really encourage people, are like, get in dialogue with the elements. I personally think camping is one of the best ways to get all of the elements. So fire, obviously, who doesn't love sitting around a campfire? Your feet are on the soil, especially if you walk barefoot like I do when I camp. Metal, sure, we have to bring our propane tanks if you're not backpacking, right? You're gonna have the glamping experience. There's some technology involved in camping now. That's the metal element in my experience, and also the interfacing with boulders, rocks. Water, if you can get near water when you're camping, beautiful. Get out on a canoe, go swimming. And then wood, the basis of the forest and the basis for fire. When we get into dialogue with something like camping, it's one of the most natural therapies you can have, which is why I camp every year with my family. I like to get out as often as I can. That is my therapy in a lot of ways. So, challenge your bodies. Don't run from the stressors. Go outside when it's cold. See what it's like to let your feet get cold for a little while. You can always warm up. Exercise in the cold. Take walks in the rain. Let your body battle it. We really need these stressors, and we have got to interface with the environment. And moreover, when we interface with the environments, walking in the rain is one of my favorite things in the world. Take a Bluetooth speaker, listen to some tunes under my poncho, and go for a walk. When it rains, I so look forward to the walks, and maybe a little sip of whiskey too. But the idea is interface with the elements. By doing so, the body and mind is more resilient, and that is needed, especially nowadays. Thanks a bunch.